God says they laughed at you when you walked away quietly, but they are not laughing anymore. Now someone is sitting in complete fear, replaying every interaction they ever had with you because two bizarre things happened and they cannot explain either one. They thought they understood you. They thought they had you figured out. But suddenly your energy changed so drastically that it shook them to their core. They are disturbed, nervous, unable to relax. And the strangest part is this: you still do not even realize what you did. You think you simply became quieter. You think you just started protecting your peace. You think you are minding your own business. But spiritually, something terrifying happened. God says your silence became louder than their manipulation. That is the first bizarre thing. People expected you to explode. They expected emotional reactions. They expected you to defend yourself, beg for clarity, demand honesty, or chase answers. Instead, you disappeared emotionally. You stopped reacting. You stopped feeding chaos. You became calm in a way that made absolutely no sense to the people who were trying to provoke you. And that calmness terrified them. Because manipulative people survive by controlling emotional reactions. When they cannot trigger you anymore, they lose their power. The moment you became emotionally disciplined, somebody around you began panicking internally. God says they are deeply disturbed because your silence forced them to hear their own conscience. Before, they could distract themselves with your reactions. Your pain entertained them. Your confusion benefited them. But once you stopped responding emotionally, the noise disappeared. And now they are trapped alone with the truth of what they did to you. That truth is haunting them. This person keeps checking your energy because your stillness feels unnatural to them. They are wondering why you no longer seem emotionally dependent on their validation. They are trying to understand why their absence no longer weakens you. They are shocked because they expected your spirit to collapse after everything you experienced. Instead, you became harder to control, and that scares them more than anger ever could. God says there is something spiritually dangerous about a healed person who no longer seeks approval. Your peace became threatening because it exposed how unstable other people truly are. They wanted you emotional, confused, insecure, easily manipulated, but heaven transformed your mind quietly while nobody was paying attention. Now your silence carries authority, and authority frightens deceptive spirits. The second bizarre thing you did completely shattered someone internally. You saw through them without exposing them publicly. This is the part destroying their peace. Most people react to betrayal loudly. Most people seek revenge. Most people announce every discovery. But you simply changed your energy. You became distant, observant, selective. You stopped giving unlimited access. And somehow they realized you knew more than you were saying. That realization terrified them. God says, the moment your discernment awakened, their mask stopped working around you. They could feel it immediately. Suddenly your eyes looked different. Your responses became shorter. Your energy became detached. You started noticing inconsistencies they thought nobody would ever detect, and they became spiritually uncomfortable. There is nothing more unsettling than being fully seen by someone who chooses silence instead of destruction. Your discernment exposed secrets without you ever needing proof. Your spirit recognized hidden motives before your mind could logically explain them. That level of spiritual awareness is rare, and people operating in deception become frightened when they realize they cannot manipulate your perception anymore. God says this person keeps wondering how much you actually know. They replay conversations in their head, trying to figure out when you noticed the lies. They study your behavior carefully because they feel exposed every time they are near you. Even your calmness scares them now, because calm people with discernment are unpredictable to manipulators. Your energy changed so dramatically that people who once underestimated you no longer know how to approach you. They remember the old version of you, the version that tolerated disrespect, the version that over-explained everything, the version that ignored red flags to keep peace. But that version is disappearing, and somebody is panicking because they depended on your old weaknesses. God says your healing became a spiritual threat to people who benefited from your wounds. Read that again carefully. Your healing disrupted emotional systems people secretly relied on. The moment you stopped accepting confusion, guilt manipulation stopped working. The moment you stopped begging for honesty, liars became uncomfortable. The moment you stopped chasing validation, controlling people lost influence over you. That shift shook somebody badly. There are people around you who can feel your transformation before you fully understand it yourself. Spirit recognizes spirit. Energy recognizes energy. And right now, somebody is terrified because they sense that God is elevating your discernment rapidly. You walk into rooms differently now. You observe differently now. You sense hidden tension instantly. You can hear jealousy beneath compliments. You can feel fake energy before words are even spoken. And the frightening part is, you no longer ignore what your spirit detects. God says this person became deeply unsettled because your intuition exposed things they spent years trying to hide from others. Without arguments, without investigations, without confrontation, you simply knew something was off, and your knowing became unbearable for them. There is a reason certain people suddenly act nervous around you. It is not always because of something you said. Sometimes your spirit alone confronts hidden darkness inside others. People carrying guilt often become uncomfortable around spiritually aware individuals because awareness exposes what deception tries to conceal. That is why eye contact changes. That is why conversations feel tense. That is why some people randomly withdraw from your life after you begin healing. Your growth activates conviction. God says someone around you is currently struggling because they can no longer predict your emotional reactions. That unpredictability creates fear inside manipulative individuals. They keep expecting the old version of you to return. The emotional version, the insecure version, the version easy to influence through guilt and confusion. But heaven closed that chapter permanently. Now your energy feels different, protected, disciplined, spiritually guarded, and they are completely shaken by it. There is another hidden layer to this situation. Your detachment forced somebody to confront their own emptiness. People often do not realize how much light you carried into their life until your energy becomes unavailable. Even individuals who mistreated you secretly depended on your patience, your kindness, your emotional depth, and your stability. Now that access is limited, they feel the absence heavily, and absence creates reflection. God says this person is not only spooked because of what you know, they are also disturbed because they can feel themselves losing access to your spirit permanently. Deep down, they know your energy is moving away from them emotionally, mentally, and spiritually. That realization is haunting them quietly. Your peace has become intimidating because most people are addicted to emotional chaos. Calmness backed by God carries invisible authority. It reveals self-control. It reveals healing. It reveals spiritual maturity. And unstable people become uncomfortable around stable souls. Never underestimate how powerful emotional discipline truly is. Your refusal to react emotionally confused people who expected easy access to your energy. They wanted arguments, drama, emotional breakdowns, but instead, you became still, observant, quiet, and now they cannot sleep peacefully because your silence feels heavier than confrontation. God says somebody underestimated your spiritual growth because they remembered your old patterns. They assumed they still understood how to manipulate you. They thought your kindness meant weakness. They mistook your patience for blindness. But heaven was sharpening your discernment in silence. Every betrayal sharpened your intuition. Every disappointment strengthened your boundaries. Every painful lesson increased your spiritual awareness. Now your presence alone exposes things people tried to keep hidden. This is why some individuals suddenly avoid your energy. Your spirit has become confrontational to deception without you even trying. You no longer tolerate fake love disguised as loyalty. You no longer entertain inconsistent energy. You no longer ignore spiritual warnings for temporary comfort. And manipulative people can feel that instantly. God says someone is terrified because they realize your intuition is becoming accurate beyond logic. You notice patterns too quickly now. You detect lies too easily now. Your spirit catches inconsistencies before your mind fully processes them. That level of awareness makes deceptive people deeply nervous. Stop doubting your discernment just because you cannot explain it immediately. Spiritual intuition rarely arrives with perfect logical evidence in the beginning. Sometimes your spirit recognizes danger before your mind catches up. God has been teaching you through experience, teaching you through betrayal, teaching you through isolation, teaching you through survival, and now your instincts are stronger than ever. God says there are people observing you secretly because they are trying to determine whether your transformation is temporary or permanent. They are waiting for emotional weakness to return, waiting for confusion to return, waiting for insecurity to reopen the door they once used to access your energy. Do not reopen that door. Protect your peace fiercely. The person who is currently shaking internally knows they can no longer manipulate your emotions the same way. They can feel the boundaries spiritually, even if you never announce them verbally. They know your spirit changed. They know your standards changed. They know your tolerance for deception disappeared, and they are panicking because they never expected you to evolve this much. God says your silence is no longer weakness. It is wisdom. Your distance is no longer avoidance. It is protection. Your calmness is no longer numbness. It is healing. And your discernment is no longer paranoia. It is spiritual awareness. There is power in becoming emotionally unavailable to chaos. The moment you stopped feeding dysfunction, unhealthy people lost control over the connection. That loss of control created fear inside them because they depended on your emotional reactions to maintain influence. Now they are left confused, wondering what changed, wondering who helped you awaken, wondering why their energy no longer affects you the same way. God says the answer is simple. You grew spiritually, you healed emotionally, and heaven removed blindness from your eyes. That transformation became terrifying to people who hoped you would stay broken forever. Hear this clearly. The right people will never fear your growth. Healthy souls celebrate healing. Genuine people respect boundaries. Honest individuals do not panic when your discernment increases. Only deceptive people become frightened when they can no longer manipulate your perception. So stop apologizing for changing. Stop shrinking yourself to comfort insecure individuals. Stop ignoring spiritual warnings just because you want peace with everyone. Not everybody deserves unlimited access to your spirit. God says somebody is still replaying your recent energy shift in their mind because they felt something close permanently. They cannot explain it logically, but spiritually they know your connection to them changed forever. Your silence told them everything. Your distance confirmed everything, and your peace exposed everything. This next season of your life will require strong discernment because God is separating you from environments that no longer align with your destiny. Some people will call you distant simply because they lost unhealthy access to your energy. Do not feel guilty for evolving. Your spirit outgrew certain patterns for a reason. God says the bizarre things you did were actually signs of spiritual maturity. You stopped reacting emotionally and you started seeing clearly. Those two changes completely disrupted somebody's ability to manipulate your reality. Now they are deeply unsettled. Meanwhile, heaven is preparing you for greater alignment, stronger protection, healthier relationships, and a future that requires wisdom instead of emotional chaos. So continue moving carefully, continue protecting your peace, continue trusting what your spirit senses, because God says the person who is shaken right now is not reacting to who you used to be. They are reacting to who you are becoming. They thought you were weak because you stayed silent when others would have exploded. They believed your calmness meant fear. They assumed your patience meant you lacked strength. Every time you walked away instead of arguing, every time you chose peace over drama, they convinced themselves that you were powerless. But what they never understood is that silence is not weakness when God is using it to protect and elevate you. There was a season when you tried to explain yourself to everyone. You wanted people to understand your heart. You gave endless chances. You tolerated disrespect because you believed love meant endurance. But pain became your teacher. Betrayal opened your eyes. Disappointment forced you to mature spiritually and emotionally. Slowly, you stopped reacting the old way. And that change shocked people more than you realize. God says someone around you became deeply disturbed the moment they noticed your silence was no longer coming from hurt. It was coming from strength. Before, your reactions gave them reassurance that they still had influence over your emotions. Your anger, your sadness, your attempts to fix things, all of it made them feel powerful. But once you became quiet, something terrifying happened for them internally. They lost access to your spirit. Manipulative people depend on emotional reactions. As long as they can trigger you, they feel in control. But your silence removed that control completely. Suddenly they could not predict you anymore. They could not manipulate your mood anymore. They could not pull energy from your pain anymore. And now they are left sitting alone with their own thoughts, their own guilt, and the consequences of their actions. That is why your silence started destroying their peace. God says they replay conversations with you in their mind constantly. They wonder whether you figured everything out. They wonder why your energy feels so distant now. They are shaken because your quietness feels intentional, and deep down they know your spirit changed permanently. You stopped arguing. You stopped chasing. You stopped explaining yourself to people committed to misunderstanding you, and your absence became louder than your presence ever was. Your silence became a mirror. Without your emotional reactions distracting them, people were forced to confront themselves, forced to face the lies they told, forced to recognize the damage they caused. Your stillness exposed truths that words never could. That is why some people suddenly act nervous around you. That is why they study your behavior carefully. That is why they feel uncomfortable when you remain calm. Your peace reminds them of their chaos. God says this transformation did not happen overnight. Heaven used every painful lesson to strengthen your spirit. The betrayal that almost broke you taught you discernment. The rejection that wounded your heart taught you emotional independence. The loneliness taught you how to rely on God instead of human validation. Now your silence carries wisdom instead of pain. Do not mistake your calmness for weakness ever again. There is power in restraint. There is authority in emotional discipline. Sometimes the strongest thing a person can do is refuse to participate in chaos. Sometimes silence becomes a form of protection, healing, and spiritual maturity all at once. And while others are disturbed trying to understand your transformation, God says continue protecting your peace, because the version of you that no longer reacts emotionally is the version heaven has been preparing all along. Someone around you is secretly terrified because you accidentally exposed them spiritually. And the frightening part is, you did not even realize you were doing it. You were not trying to uncover secrets. You were not trying to intimidate anyone. You simply changed. Your spirit became sharper. Your discernment became stronger. And suddenly, people who once felt comfortable hiding behind masks began feeling exposed in your presence. They thought you would never notice. They thought you were too kind to see through deception. They thought your patience meant blindness. but heaven was quietly awakening your spiritual awareness the entire time. God says the moment your discernment increased, someone near you became deeply unsettled. They noticed the shift before you fully understood it yourself. Your energy changed, your responses changed, the way you looked at people changed. You stopped ignoring red flags, you stopped accepting inconsistent behavior, you stopped explaining away the strange feelings in your spirit. And now they are panicking internally because they know you see them differently. There is nothing more terrifying to a deceptive person than being spiritually recognized by someone they underestimated. Manipulative people survive through illusion. They depend on confusion, distraction, and emotional control. But your spirit started detecting things your mind could not yet fully explain. You noticed hidden jealousy beneath compliments. You sensed dishonesty behind certain words. You felt tension in conversations that appeared normal on the surface. And even though you stayed quiet about it, they could feel your awareness growing. That awareness exposed them spiritually. God says this person keeps replaying interactions with you in their mind, trying to figure out how much you actually know. They are nervous because your silence feels dangerous now. Before, they felt confident controlling the narrative around you. But once your discernment awakened, their mask stopped working the same way. Now every conversation feels uncomfortable for them. Every glance feels intense. Every moment around you feels spiritually heavy. Because guilt reacts strongly in the presence of truth, you must understand something important. Spirit recognizes spirit. Long before words are spoken, energy reveals intentions. And God has been teaching you how to sense what people try to hide. The painful experiences you survived sharpened your intuition. Betrayal trained your discernment. Isolation strengthened your connection to spiritual guidance. Now you can feel things other people ignore. And that gift unsettles deceptive individuals deeply. God says the person who is secretly terrified never expected your spiritual growth to become this strong. They remembered the old version of you, the version that ignored warning signs, tolerated confusion, and trusted too easily. They assumed they could always manipulate your perception. But heaven changed you quietly. Now your calmness feels intimidating, your silence feels observant, your energy feels protected, and they no longer know how to approach you comfortably. The reason this situation feels strange is because you exposed them without public confrontation. You did not embarrass them. You did not attack them. You simply withdrew your energy. You became more careful, more selective, more spiritually alert, and somehow that terrified them more than direct conflict ever could. God says people become frightened when they realize they can no longer hide behind performance. Your spirit started seeing beyond appearances, beyond words, beyond fake kindness. And the more your discernment increased, the more uncomfortable certain individuals became around you. That discomfort is not your imagination. Your growth is exposing hidden intentions naturally. Do not misuse this awareness. Spiritual discernment is not given so you can control others or walk in pride. It is given for protection, wisdom, and alignment. Continue moving with humility. Continue observing quietly. Continue protecting your peace without needing to announce every insight. Because sometimes your silence reveals more power than confrontation ever could. God says someone is secretly terrified because they know your spirit is no longer asleep. They can feel that your intuition has awakened. They can sense that manipulation no longer works the same way on you. And even though they may never admit it openly, deep down they are shaken because the version of you standing before them now is no longer easy to deceive. And that realization is destroying their peace silently every single day. Has not been sleeping peacefully lately because of two strange things you did without even realizing the spiritual impact they carried. You think you were simply protecting your peace. You think you were just moving differently, staying quiet, focusing on yourself. But while you continued living your life normally, somebody around you became deeply unsettled, replaying your actions over and over in their mind. They cannot relax. They cannot stop thinking about you. And the frightening part is, you still do not fully understand what changed. God says the first strange thing you did was you stopped reacting emotionally. That shift alone shook someone more than words ever could. They were used to controlling the emotional atmosphere around you. They expected explanations, arguments, sadness, frustration, or desperation. They expected your energy to remain attached to their approval. But suddenly, you became calm, quiet, detached, and your silence started haunting them. Manipulative people feel powerful when they can trigger emotional reactions from others. As long as they can affect your emotions, they believe they still have influence over your spirit. But the moment you stopped reacting the old way, they lost that sense of control completely. Now they are confused. They keep wondering why your energy feels so different, why you no longer chase clarity, why you no longer seem emotionally available for chaos. And that confusion is keeping them awake at night. Your silence became louder than confrontation because it forced them to sit alone with their own thoughts. Before, your reactions distracted them from accountability. Your pain entertained them. Your emotional responses reassured them that they still mattered deeply in your spirit. But now your stillness has created a mirror they cannot escape, and every time they look into that mirror, they see the truth about themselves more clearly. That truth is disturbing their peace. The second strange thing you did shook them even harder. You started seeing through people spiritually without announcing it publicly. This terrified them because they realized your discernment had awakened quietly. You began noticing inconsistencies. You sensed hidden motives. You picked up on strange energy shifts. And even though you stayed calm about it, they could feel that something in you changed. Your eyes became different. Your responses became more careful. Your energy became more guarded. You stopped ignoring the uncomfortable feelings in your spirit just to maintain temporary peace. And the moment someone realized you were no longer blind to their behavior, fear entered them deeply. Now they replay every interaction, wondering how much you actually know. They study your silence, trying to decode it. They feel exposed every time they are around you, because there is nothing more frightening to a deceptive person than being spiritually recognized by someone they underestimated. Your discernment exposed things without you needing evidence or confrontation. Your spirit started sensing truth faster than your mind could explain it logically, and manipulative individuals become deeply uncomfortable when intuition begins bypassing their performance. This person cannot sleep peacefully because your transformation disrupted the emotional control they once believed they had over you. They remembered the older version of you, the overly trusting version, the emotionally reactive version, the version easier to manipulate through confusion and guilt. But heaven changed you silently. Now your peace feels intimidating. Your calmness feels powerful. Your silence feels intentional. And they are secretly terrified because they know they can no longer access your spirit the same way. You must understand that healing changes your energy dramatically. When God begins restoring your spirit, unhealthy people notice immediately. Your boundaries strengthen, your intuition sharpens, your tolerance for deception decreases, and individuals who once benefited from your emotional wounds suddenly become uncomfortable around your growth. That is exactly what is happening now. God says somebody is lying awake at night because your silence forced them to confront realities they spent years avoiding. They cannot understand how you became so emotionally disciplined. They cannot understand why their words no longer affect you the same way. They cannot understand how your spirit became so difficult to manipulate. And that loss of control is disturbing them deeply. Continue protecting your peace. Do not feel guilty for changing. Growth always confuses people who are comfortable with your old weaknesses. The right people will celebrate your healing. Only deceptive people become frightened when your discernment awakens. God says your silence is no longer weakness. It is wisdom. Your distance is no longer coldness. It is protection, and your spiritual awareness is no longer something to ignore. It is the very gift that is saving you from people who never deserved full access to your energy in the first place. Your energy changed so hard that someone became completely spooked overnight, and they still have not recovered from it. One moment they thought they understood you completely. They thought they knew how you would react, how you would feel, how much access they had to your emotions. But suddenly something shifted inside you so powerfully that it shook them to their core. Now they are nervous around you, watching you differently, trying to figure out what happened. Because the version of you standing before them now does not feel like the same person anymore. God says this transformation was spiritual before it was visible. Long before your behavior changed outwardly, heaven had already started changing your mind, your discernment, your emotional patterns, and your spirit internally. The pain you survived was not meaningless. Every betrayal sharpened your intuition. Every disappointment strengthened your boundaries. Every lonely season forced you to depend on God instead of people, and eventually your energy became impossible to manipulate. That is what spooked them. Manipulative individuals are comfortable around wounded versions of you. They are comfortable when you constantly seek validation, comfortable when you tolerate disrespect just to avoid losing connections, comfortable when your emotions can be controlled through confusion, guilt, mixed signals, or attention. But the moment your spirit healed, the entire dynamic changed. Suddenly you stopped chasing, stopped over-explaining, stopped reacting emotionally to every little thing, and your calmness started terrifying people who once relied on your emotional vulnerability. Someone around you became deeply unsettled because your silence no longer feels weak. It feels intentional. Your distance no longer feels emotional. It feels spiritually guided, and your presence now carries an authority they cannot explain logically. That unexplained shift is haunting them. Energy never lies. Even when words remain polite, people can feel when your spirit changes. They can sense when your tolerance decreases. They can feel when your intuition awakens. They can recognize when they no longer have the same emotional influence over you. And someone realized overnight that they lost access to the old version of you forever. That realization shook them badly. This person keeps replaying interactions in their mind, trying to understand when everything changed. They remember how easy it once was to affect your emotions, how predictable your reactions used to be, how deeply attached your energy once seemed. But now you feel different, more guarded, more observant, more emotionally disciplined. And that emotional discipline is frightening people who depended on your instability. There is something spiritually intimidating about a person who heals quietly. You did not announce your transformation publicly. You did not warn people that your discernment was increasing. You simply evolved silently. And because the transformation happened gradually within your spirit, people around you did not notice how powerful the change was until it was already complete. Now your peace feels unreachable to them. God says someone became completely spooked because your energy started exposing things without you even speaking. Your calmness revealed their chaos. Your self-control revealed their emotional instability. Your silence forced them to confront truths they were desperately trying to avoid. That is why they suddenly act uncomfortable around you. That is why their energy feels nervous now. Your spirit became a mirror they cannot escape. Spiritually aware people naturally expose hidden intentions. You no longer ignore strange feelings in your spirit. You no longer force yourself to trust energy that feels inconsistent. You no longer sacrifice your peace just to maintain unhealthy connections. And manipulative people can feel that instantly. God says your growth disrupted emotional systems people secretly depended on. Some individuals built their confidence around controlling your emotions. Some depended on your constant forgiveness without accountability. Some relied on your old insecurities to maintain influence over your life. But heaven removed those weaknesses slowly, and now they are terrified because they no longer recognize the person you became. Your energy carries different weight now because your spirit survived things that should have broken you. There is authority in surviving pain without becoming bitter. There is power in healing without announcing every lesson publicly. And there is something deeply unsettling about someone who no longer reacts from emotional wounds. That is the version of you people are experiencing now. God says this next season will require strong discernment because not everyone celebrating your growth actually feels comfortable with it. Some people miss the wounded version of you because the healed version can no longer be controlled. Read that again carefully. Some people preferred you broken because broken people are easier to manipulate, but your healing changed the atmosphere completely. Do not apologize for becoming emotionally unavailable to chaos. Your peace was expensive. Your wisdom came through painful lessons. Your discernment developed through betrayal and survival. You earned this transformation spiritually, and while someone is secretly disturbed, trying to understand your sudden shift, heaven is reminding you that your growth is not something to fear. It is something to protect. Your energy changed because your spirit awakened. Your intuition strengthened. Your emotional dependence on people decreased. And once that happened, unhealthy individuals immediately sensed they could no longer control you the same way. That realization became terrifying for them overnight. Meanwhile, you are stepping into a version of yourself that is calmer, wiser, stronger, and far more spiritually protected than ever before. And that transformation is only beginning. Someone is shaking right now because your spirit finally saw through their mask. And the scariest part for them is not that you confronted them. It's that you didn't. You simply knew, quietly, instantly, without needing proof in their presence or permission from anyone else. There was a time when they felt safe around you. They believed your kindness meant naivety. They assumed your patience meant ignorance. They thought you would always question yourself before questioning them. That version of you made them comfortable because it allowed them to manage the narrative, control the tone, and hide behind carefully built appearances. But something changed. Your discernment awakened in a way that cannot be ignored anymore. You started noticing things you used to overlook. The tone behind words, the inconsistency in stories, the energy shift when they entered a room, the subtle contradictions that don't align when you step back and observe instead of emotionally participating. And even though you said very little, your spirit started saying everything. That is what shook them. Deception survives in environments where perception is clouded, but your clarity increased. And once clarity enters, masks stop working the same way. You didn't need a dramatic reveal. You didn't need confrontation. You simply stopped being emotionally available to confusion. You became observant, quiet, measured, and that alone exposed more than any accusation ever could. This person is now replaying every interaction with you. They are trying to find the exact moment you figured it out, but they cannot pinpoint it because it wasn't one moment. It was a shift in your spirit, a gradual sharpening, a quiet awakening that made your awareness too precise to deceive anymore. Now they are uneasy around you, not because you are loud, but because you are aware. There is something deeply unsettling for deceptive people when they realize they are no longer mentally invisible. Your energy no longer accepts surface-level explanations. Your intuition catches inconsistencies faster than they can adjust their behavior, and even your silence feels like analysis to them now. That is why they are shaking internally, because they can feel that you see them differently. Your presence alone now creates pressure in them, not because you are attacking them, but because your spirit no longer aligns with their performance. And when alignment breaks, Exposure begins naturally without a single word being spoken. You didn't expose them publicly. You exposed them spiritually, and that is what they cannot handle. Understand this clearly. People who depend on masks become unstable when someone can see behind them. Your discernment didn't become louder. It became sharper. You stopped needing explanations that don't make sense. You stopped ignoring the discomfort in your spirit just to maintain peace. You stopped giving benefit of the doubt to patterns that keep repeating. And that growth changed everything. Now they don't know how to act around you. They second-guess their words. They monitor your reactions. They wonder what you've already understood, because your silence is no longer empty. It is perception. This person is shaken because they realize something irreversible. They cannot return you to ignorance. They cannot reset your awareness. They cannot make you unsee what your spirit has already recognized. And that loss of control is what's disturbing them deeply. This is why your energy feels different lately. It is not confusion. It is clarity. It is not paranoia. It is discernment. It is not emotional instability. It is spiritual awareness coming online fully. And when awareness rises, deception becomes uncomfortable. God says you did not become colder. You became clearer. You did not become distant. You became selective. You did not become suspicious. You became awake. And now someone around you is shaking because they realize the old version of you is no longer accessible. Not because you are cruel, but because you are no longer blind. Keep your discernment steady. You don't need to announce what you see for it to be valid. Sometimes the most powerful exposure happens in silence, when your spirit simply refuses to align with deception anymore. And that is exactly what they are feeling right now. Not your anger, not your confrontation, but your awareness. And it is destroying their peace from the inside out.